Welcome to another episode of Fault Lines. I am Adio.
And I'm Confidence Macharry.
All right, so today we'll be talking, a bit about Nigeria's security. We'll be touching on Togo, and obviously we'll be touching on the U.S. Latest, security policy. But first, let's start with strategy. Sorry, but let's start with Nigeria, and the first thing is the fact that in Kwara State, a member of Miyetti Allah was apprehended by the police. The community had alerted the police to the fact that they saw a man wielding a weapon, strolling across the community, and they alerted the police, and he was arrested. But the tricky thing here was that when he was questioned or interrogated, the Sahara Reporters News reports that he claimed that he was armed by the Office of the National Security Advisor. Another statement was published in the Sahara News crediting the Kwara State government, claiming that the individual or the groups who were apprehended were members of the Miyetti Allah, that was clarified, but that they had also been acting under a national security initiative coordinated by the Office of the National Security Advisor, where this group were going to be armed to sort of provide some sort of security across, the fringes of the state, particularly in Kwara South and along, the forest areas. And I found that curious, if not ridiculous, because if you're going to provide protection, and this is assuming that the story is true, if you're going to provide any sort of protection and you're going to arm any group within any community, I would expect that there should be a basic interaction, collaboration, and participation of the local community themselves, who would inadvertently be in the know that these groups of persons are going to be protecting whether it's our forest or our community, and the community agrees to that level of protection, and there's a bit of coordination and oversight with members of, that particular community. And there's some sort of, social accountability mechanism where they can hold these people to account. But from what we have read, and like I say, if the reports are true, you arm a group of people who, over the last few months, have been suspect, especially to local communities where there is not enough trust, for these individuals. You arm them in the guise that they are going to be providing some sort of, policing or security of that particular environment. And the sorest part of it is that it's coordinated by the Office of the National Security Advisor. And that makes absolutely no sense to me. It's ludicrous. And I just don't know how this is supposed to translate to better security for people in Kwara South. I just don't know if you're offended by this news story, as I am. And I just hope that somehow this story has been misreported, and it just cannot be that an initiative was taking this dumb from the Office of the National Security, Advisor.
Yeah, I'm not offended. I mean, if I was from the local government area in Kwara State, I would have been offended. So I'm not offended. There are lots of takeaways to learn from this story. The first is that for want of context, if a lot of local government areas and these communities are the ones that the alleged Miyetti Allah guys are supposed to take care of, and from the Sahara Reporters reportage, what we hear is that the Office of the National Security Advisor, through the Kwara State government, provided vehicles for members of the Miyetti Allah who were willing enough to carry out protections for their own communities, which, of course, is very small. The Fulani community in in local government area is relatively small compared with the Yorubas who live in those areas. And the Kwara State government provided them guns, provided them weapons, and when the entire operation was done, they were supposed to return the weapons, return the logistics back to.
This is driving me nuts.
Yeah. Listen, they're supposed to return the stuff to the Kwara State government, but unfortunately, some people absconded with the whole thing. Now, where it gets really technical is the fact that, from the NSA's perspective, they are using the cats to beat let's say the tiger or something, because both of them are still in the same cat family. I'll explain. At the height of the Fulani herdsmen crisis in Igango local government, in Igango, Ibarakpa local government area in Oyo State in 2021, you do know that there were Fulanis that were living in those areas
Yeah.
prior to that.
In fact, I visited that area
Very
particularly.
good. There were Fulanis that were living there. The Yorubas who were peeved at the security degradation in the area were like, yo, we are not having problems with you Fulanis that are here. You understand? I think Kayode Fayemi, when he was governor of Ekiti State, made something very profound. He said a statement around there that the Nigerian Fulanis are not necessarily the problem. You understand? What Kayode Fayemi said, and what I learned during the Barakpa episode, is that the Bororo Fulanis are being the one being identified by the Nigerian Fulanis as being the one coming to cause problems. Within that 2019 to 2021 period, the Bororo Fulanis were causing problems in Ekiti. They were causing problems in the FCT. They were causing problems in Kwara. They were causing problems in Oyo. And the problems they were causing was not just on just the Yoruba communities, for instance, in the southwest. They were also attacking the Fulani communities too. Several Fulani leaders in Yoruba communities also lost their sons to that. Now, it is harebrained to think of what the NSA's office was thinking in arming local Fulanis or Boro Fulanis to fight. I really do not understand the entire thing. But my key takeaway from this is that, number one, the accountability problem we've always had in Nigerian security has come to play again. Several episodes of this podcast have mentioned the fact that excellence is not our culture. So we do things haphazardly and then we expect something to come out, something great to come out of doing things haphazardly. The much more logical thing would have been, you say you have communities that are undergoing criminal attacks. Why are you not carrying them along? Now, everything I've said so far is not ridiculous yet. The most ridiculous part of this arrangement is that the people who the NSA's office and the Kwara State government are deciding to fight rather, because they're attacking communities in Kwara South. They are not your garden variety bandits. They are not people who just come together and say, yo, man, we need to get food today, and we just, okay, what do we do? Oh, there's this rich man, we need to kidnap him. They are not the kind of people you're dealing with. You're dealing with Al-Qaeda-allied Islamist groups. Mahmudawa, which the NSA's office says they have arrested their leader, Mahmuda, I think it was in August or September of this year, is the leader of that particular sect. That guy, I was reading the link you shared with me from James Barnett and I think Ahmadissa, with their latest research on the interplay between banditry and Islamism in northwestern Nigeria. They went a little bit more detail. They went a little more detail than what the Nigerian National Security Advisor's Office would have said when they allegedly arrested this other guy. And then they're like, this guy has moved into the Kenji Park area, the Kenji National Park area that straddles the boundary between Niger and Kwara State since, if I'm not mistaken, since 2021. And when he moved down there, his remit was typical of the jihadist style. Going to places that are having security issues, and then you try to get into the act by telling them that, see, we are here to protect you from these bandits, and tell the bandits, on the other hand, that, see, if you don't join us, you will be killed. So you have to put your arms down. If you join us, we're going to take care of you and everything. The bandits, of course, they refuse because they've been here before you, and then it leads to a clash, and the community people are better off for some time. But then after the community people become better off because the attacks from criminal groups have reduced, the Islamists quickly turn on them and start preaching a very strict code of Sharia law. Men not being allowed to shave their beards, women not being allowed to be seen around with men that are not their husbands, and several other ridiculous things that you get to expect Islamist groups to do. That's exactly the same way this guy penetrated Kwara communities and has been causing trouble ever since last year. Now, the violence in Kwara South, especially in places like Ifelodun, Patigi, Barutin especially, and if you look at the map of Kwara State, you know that Barutin is right on the border with Niger, right on the border with Benin, and all of the security issues that are happening from northern Benin sort of transcends down into Barutin and then enters the Kenji Park area in Niger State. So they use those places as their bases, and they've been destroying and they've been, give me a minute, and they've been attacking communities. So Like I said previously, the Nigerian military was alerted to the problem when it was only affecting Barutin and I think one other local government area. They went in earlier this year, sent a brigade from Ilorin when they did a 2-week operation and then returned to base. It didn't take 3 days. Those guys returned. Now, this is the ridiculousness of the NSA's plan. These people who you're arming to fight bandits are people that the Nigerian army has not been able to defeat, because whenever they try to defeat them, they simply moved down into Niger State, away from the scope of operation.
Yeah.
Yet you arm people who are not well trained to take them on. And then when they are done taking them on, allegedly, some people decide to abscond with the vehicles, abscond with the weapons, and decide to turn the same guns you've given to them on the communities they are supposed to protect.
Now, you see, while you were talking about the Kanji Park,
Yeah.
I don't think we realize how much incompetence over the years have cost us so much as a country, because the Kainji Park back in the days used to be protected by forest guards.
Yep.
It was well run, well policed by the government, and students used to go there for excursions. The same thing
That's
with
the same place that has the Kenji Lake.
exactly the same thing with the Falgore forest.
Kano.
That connects these 3 states together. They used to have forest guards. Many people don't even know that Sambisa back in the day
Yeah, it was a game reserve
used to
by
be
the
a game
British.
reserve.
It was handed over
Now-
to Nigeria in 1976.
So what happened over the years in many of these places across northern Nigeria was that governance retreated from these places, ceded those spaces, and due to poor governance, due to poor investments, those places were taken over by terrorists, bandits, and all sorts of criminals. And that should portend a lesson for governance in this country, that places where government or governance retreats from, they are usually and quickly occupied by non-state actors who cause all sorts of mayhem to citizens. But just to quickly wrap up on this ridiculous plan by the NSA, and if we lived in very serious countries, I would expect that there should be very serious hearings
This is a scandal.
by the National Assembly
This is a
to
scandal.
get to the bottom of this. This calls, in many regards,
Yeah.
the NSA should actually be considering resigning, because I cannot explain how you arm a group of people to protect people who do not know that they are being protected by a certain group. And then, like you rightfully said, at a time where they thought that the exercise was over, they were running around looking for these people to collect back. Who do you give arms and they return it back in present day Nigeria?
Yeah.
And so this level of anyhowness that we have taken to unprecedented heights in this country really needs to stop, because it's costing too much lives of our citizens. It's causing us to lose too much territory to non-state actors. And the National Security Advisor should be answering very serious questions from the National Assembly. That is if those are another serious bunch of people anyway. But let us quickly touch on the fact that our troops, are trapped in Burkina Faso, 11 of them as we hear. Now, the Nigerian government claims it was an emergency landing. The government in Ouagadougou believes that this was happening right at the time where Nigeria was intervening in Benin Republic. And it looks like a coordinated effort where Nigeria was trying to show a bit of might across the region, and it couldn't have been an emergency landing. Now, of course, the reality is that we don't have, as I recall, any sort of bilateral agreement, especially a status, of forces agreement between Nigeria and Burkina Faso that, provides some sort of legal framework guiding military men in crushing into that country. So they are standing on the principle of the sovereignty of their airspace, and the fact that there's a bit of hostility between Nigeria and the AES. And to that extent, they couldn't trust what our intentions were when our soldiers were found in that country. But, this brings 2 things to light. One is the fact that there's so much to be lost with this growing hostility between Nigeria and many of these Sahelian states. I listened to an analyst on TV, I think it was yesterday or the day before, who said Nigeria should just roll in the tanks and and I think a lot of people still have this hangover of what Nigeria was or is,
Giants of
you
Africa.
know, and that we just can simply roll over into these countries and take over their capital and bring back our soldiers. And I thought that was quite an irresponsible statement to make. But I think the larger point here for me is that there is nothing to be gained. Of course, we can put all sorts of diplomatic pressure and things like that. But the larger picture for me is that there's a lot to be gained by having some sort of a relationship with these military leaders in the Sahel, whether it's to advance our national security, whether it's on trade relations or whatever it is. There is much more to be gained by having some sort of relationship with these leaders, because if we continue on this trajectory, it would escalate. And once things like this escalate, someone is likely to be trigger happy, someone will make a mistake, and who knows, we are in for some sort of a crisis that we never intended for. And that means we'll be drawn into some sort of crisis where we'll be pooling military resources, combating 3 states in the Sahel. That opens the window for insurgents to have a free ride in northern Nigeria. That sort of walks back whatever economic progress we seem to have made as a country. I mean, it's just a doomsday scenario, and I think there's a lot more to be benefited, from having a collaborative relationship with these people. But I just don't know what your thoughts are as to how to get this 11 of our soldiers back home.
Yeah, let me address your points first of all. The people you want to have a collaborative relationship with, do they want to have a collaborative relationship with you?
Well, that's a $1 million question.
No, it's not a $1 million question. The answer is no. The answer is clearly no, because the Tinubu administration felt its missteps, quote unquote, in the whole Niger invasion fiasco thing, and tried to retrace its steps almost immediately, given the kind of backlash it had from the north when the entirety of the plan was leaked. And there were a couple of meetings, high-level meetings between Nigeria and Niger, trying to, let's say, some sort of rapprochement of some sort. The National Security Advisor, the then Chief of Army Staff, senior members of Nigeria's security apparatchik, they went to Niger, tried to, get the whole thing back on track, relations back on track, even at the very least to resume cross-border patrols, between the Nigeria and Niger border. What happened out of it? Nothing. These efforts began in at least late 2023. By late 2024, we had Tiani, the head of the Nigerian junta, coming out to say all sorts of unfounded nonsense about Nigeria making some sort of irresponsible deal with France to set up a base in Borno State and they'll be overseeing operations deep into Niger Republic and several other nonsense he said without facts, though. Now, if you fast forward down to 2025, a few weeks before the Benin coup, Chani came out to do the exact same thing. Not to Nigeria, but to Benin. A week later, there was a coup. And people who were fingered in the coup actually found that Burkina Faso, at least 7 of them were involved. It tells you a picture that if you compare what has happened, what I've narrated, with how ECOWAS tried to get the departing AES states to remain, and all of the lengths, all of the bending over backwards they did to get them to remain, it tells you of an irretrievably broken down relationship. The people you want to reach out to do not want to be reached out to. So in some way, I could understand people who say, yeah, let's go back to the 1990s where Nigerian military was just simply rolling the tanks to Ouagadougou or one other smaller capital in West Africa and then get the things done. The thing is, we are no longer in the 1990s. So we cannot be like many British people who are still living in the days of the empire. Nigeria's influence has waned. Now, there is a way that Nigeria could have solved this problem. Let's say, if we had a Buhari in office, this would not be a problem because, number one, Buhari is nothing. Niger Republic is made of 53% Hausa. I've made this point before.
Exactly.
They respect Buhari a lot.
But even at that, don't you think we can have, because the delegation that was sent at the time, we didn't have a foreign minister at that time. The first delegation, obviously. But don't you think that if we had a strong northern delegation that were consistent, at least, I'm not saying we should be hogmates now. No, that's not what I'm saying. but to at least reduce tensions between Nigeria and Niger, which will obviously cascade to the other countries in the AES. But don't you think that a powerful northern delegation leading that negotiation with these countries could yield some level of results?
You don't need. Yes, I know that this might sound contradictory to the point I was making before I interjected, but I don't think that the Hail Mary to this thing is a powerful northern delegation. I think the Hail Mary to this thing is getting seasoned Nigerian diplomats that understand geopolitics of the 21st century, not geopolitics of the 20th century, not Nigeria's geopolitics in 2021 or 2025. Because most of the politics that we are looking at right now as it affects our neighborhood are internal. Tinubu wanted to invade Niger with ECOWAS in 2023. The Northerners opposed it. Ever since then, he got a Northerner as Minister of Foreign Affairs. Yeah. That one is kind of person you'd have expected that would understand the kind of geopolitical realities we are in 2025, but he does not, given that he used to be ambassador to Germany before, he studied international relations, he's well experienced in this kind of thing, he has been in government before, but he just simply does not have the bandwidth. You know, you saw his interview with Piers Morgan over the Christian genocide thing. Yeah. So, ever since Bolaji Akinyemi retired as Nigeria's foreign minister in the 1980s, his successors so far has shown a lack of understanding of geopolitics, a lack of appreciation of grand strategy, and a lack of appreciation of Nigeria's place in a changing world. As a result, number one, we can no longer project power. We do not understand our region anymore, and we are losing the space to so many other people who are simply looking into the vacuum and say, hey, this is a very good place to fill in. Now, what I would say is this. The foreign ministry needs to be overhauled. We need to go away from just simply appointing just anybody to become permanent secretary in the foreign ministry or just anybody who has political connections to be foreign minister. We need a whole different set of Nigerian diplomats that will be able to understand what it means to be Nigerian. Number two, what the Nigerian national interest is at the moment, what it should be, and how it should be designed going forward. That kind of a way, that expertise will now come into advising Tinubu that say, hey, Mr. President, you're getting too close to France. We have our backyards to take care of. And the more you get too close to France, the more problem you portend for our foreign policy, the more problem you portend for our hegemony in the region. So Tinubu himself does not do himself any good. By getting too close to France, today is holidaying there, tomorrow is doing one checks there, tomorrow is meeting Macron.
Tomorrow we're signing a tax agreement with, and I found that I found out ridiculous. Yes, why in the midst of this hostility we are publicly celebrating some sort of a tax agreement with the French, even though they say it's technical advice.
It's crazy.
And I thought that was quite juvenile, given our geopolitical reality.
Because this thing is so much of a low-hanging fruit that one would say in the beginning, these Sahelian regimes were anti-Western in their outlook. But that anti-Western sentiment has an arrowhead. They're relating with the Americans. Yeah. The Americans are always going there. They're relating with the European Union. The one person they do not want to relate with is France. And then you look at the entire thing where your influence has waned because you've been so insular dealing with your economic and security challenges that you lost the space to Russia and you lost the space to France. And then the one opportunity where France gets kicked out, you decide to go embrace that person. So Tinubu's understanding of geopolitics is very shallow. Now, what I am suggesting is if we can get seasoned Nigerian diplomats who understand, foreign service officers who understand geopolitical realities, the divide between East and West, not the Cold War of the 1970s, but Cold War 2.0 in 2025, would have been able to advise the president and say, you know, this thing you're doing is very wrong. We have a backyard to maintain. And if we keep going in this direction where we get too close to people that our friends or our neighbors would like to see out through the door, we are going to lose influence. Once that is done, I don't think we are going to get back our
confidence. We have 5 more minutes to run through the last two stories. And now let's quickly touch on Togo. Togo, there's news reports that they are considering the likelihood of them joining the AES bloc is significantly high. There was a poll that showed that 55% of the population of the country are in favor of the country joining the bloc. Now, of course, there are economic gains there, which is the fact that, you know, the AES countries want to use the Lomé port for imports and exports, which helps the country economically. Yeah. There is also the security considerations because northern Togo shares a border, I think, with Burkina Faso. And the increasing attacks from GMNI in that particular corridor has necessitated some sort of collaboration and military intelligence sharing between both countries. So there's a national security imperative for them to also join that particular bloc. But Be that as it may, this also creates broader geopolitical implications for us because we're losing, it appears that we're losing a coastal state to be joining the AES. And I'm not sure what that means for our influence across the region, because if Togo goes and they begin to put pressure, because that would mean serious economic pressure for Benin Republic. And in no time, because they'll be losing a lot of business, to the Lome port. In no time, they may also be pressured towards not fully cooperating with the AES, but at least having some sort of relationship. And that puts us in serious jeopardy, as a country. But I don't know how you're interpreting this seeming interest that Togo now has, for joining the AES. And I might quickly add that there seems to be an amendment in the Togolese constitution that is going to grant the president almost a long life stay in office. And perhaps that's also playing into his calculation that the ECOWAS might be hostile to that provision to extend my stay in office unconstitutionally. And if I align with a group of military leaders, that will give me the kind of legitimacy I need to stay in office longer than the constitution allows. But like I said, I don't know what your thoughts are.
If Nasingbe is thinking about that, I don't think he's thinking the right way. I don't think he's thinking the right. Part of the stick I've been using to beat ECOWAS for a really long time is their choice to be reactive instead of proactive to the issues in the region. Much of my recommendations have been that there should be a change to the treaty, the ECOWAS Lagos Treaty, that says that instead of just choosing to remain on the sidelines until a coup happens and then you go ahead to condemn the coup, why don't you revise your treaty to say that, just like the EU does in, say, a place like Poland and Hungary, whenever they sidestep democratic norms, executive overreaches and the likes, and you call them to order and say, this is going to lead to problems, it's non-democratic, you have to stop that now. So if Gnassingbé is thinking that way, I don't think that ECOWAS is his problem until the coup happens. So Togo's journey to the AES is not something that is starting in December 2025. As a matter of fact, since February, the foreign minister was asked if Togo will be joining the AES states. He didn't emphatically reject the idea. He only said that it is something that the president and the people of Togo will decide, which is, in diplomatic terms, that this person is already 1 foot at the door. And the coup in Benin just made things a little more clearer. The person who was the ringleader, the architect of the coup, Lieutenant Colonel Patrick Tigris, or what his name was, he fled Benin and they made his way to Togo. As of the last time we were recording, the Beninese authority pinpointed his location to Togo, and then they're refusing extradition. And then almost immediately we are seeing increased trade with, the AES states. I should warn that the last time we were doing the last episode we were doing, there was a uranium shipment from Niger that went missing. This is supposed to be not just a regional concern, but an international concern, because the International Atomic Energy Agency could not locate it for days. For about 5 days since it was missing, they could not locate it. It left Niger and went through two strongholds that were not necessarily controlled by any state government, but by armed groups, Islamist groups. And that's the problem. That when a uranium shipment goes missing, we are talking about something that you use to make nuclear weapons, radioactive material, atomic physics, and several other things. Only for us to later hear that the stuff has found its way to the port in Lome. So what it tells you is that even though relations between Benin, where that sort of shipment would have passed if relations between Cotonou, Porto Novo, and Niamey were good, that thing landing in Lome tells you a lot of things. And that is that before the end of 2026, by the time 2026, it will not be wrong for us to project that Togo is going to be part of AES. And as to what it means, geopolitically for us, yes, of course, we've lost another member as Nigeria, losing another member to in ECOWAS to another state. But I would like to invoke Alan Paton's title for his book. It's a cry, the beloved country. But in a sense, we should not really be crying. in the sense that all of these other people are leaving. Yes, it is a loss to lose a littoral state to the Alliance of Sahelian States, because, of course, it's only logical that Morocco, which they've gone to, Niger had gone to meet, and many of the AES states had gone to meet for international trade by the sea, is too far away. It makes sense to go to Togo, since Niger is refusing to play ball with Benin. But the point I'm going to make in conclusion is, we've been crying a lot about many countries leaving ECOWAS. President Goodluck Jonathan was asked a couple of days ago if he feels that ECOWAS is going to fragment so bad that only a few members are going to be there. And he felt that it was a good thing, for our democracy. But I differ. Not necessarily because I do not like the idea of people leaving. As a matter of fact, I like the idea of people leaving ECOWAS. I know it's not something I'm losing sleep over nowadays. But where I differ with Jonathan is that he's looking at it from a democratic perspective. I am not. I'm looking at it from an economic perspective. The last time we were here, I said that ECOWAS has lost its identity. Yeah. It doesn't know what it wants to be, whether it's an economic grouping or a political union. It hasn't made that. For it to make that, it has to decide and then change its treaty. But look at it this way. The AES countries have left. These are some of the world's poorest countries. I'm not talking about the region. I'm talking about the world. They left with their baggages and everything. In the past, ECOWAS used to have this Anglophone versus Francophone rivalry when it comes to decision making. So the people who used to be at the forefront, or the people who used to support the leader in this, and the leader being Ivory Coast, have gone. So you now have Ivory Coast fighting with Burkina Faso and everything. So why don't we have a situation where you disband ECOWAS the way it is now, and then you have smaller countries collaborating with each other? Let's say there's a free trade agreement between Nigeria and Benin and Ghana. Of course, we are going to bypass Togo, but if Togo chooses to remain in ECOWAS, they could join the bloc. We've been talking a lot about getting the ECO, that's the West African currency, up and running since before my father was born. Why don't you put economies together and say, okay, we're no longer having ECOWAS as we know it, but now we're going to be having developmental clusters, and say Ghana, Ivory Coast, and maybe the closest country to any of them, not Mali. Now I'm talking about littoral states. Put your economies together, do a free trade zone. If you want to create a cartel for just cocoa exports alone, by all means do it. Integrate your economies. So by the time you give a timeline and say Ghana and Ivory Coast, this is the timeline for you to integrate your economies, ensure there's free travel, ensure there's free movement of goods and services, ensure there's greater security coordination between your countries. Do that for 10 years. Nigeria, Benin, and Togo, integrate your economies. Do this for 10 years. Then at the end of 10 years, we'll not come together and say, okay, we want to create an economic grouping. Would that not be easier? Would that not be a lot more easier in terms of the region's growth prospects compared to the ECOWAS as moribund as it is now? It certainly does. It certainly does make more sense. So if really ECOWAS fractures today, all the more good. But what we are doing with that fracture is now going to tell on our ability to read the signs and read the tea leaves going into the future.
Okay, I think that's a fabulous place to draw the curtain. We're out of time. We can't discuss the U.S. national security strategy.
That's really sad.
Probably lead with that in the next episode.
Really, really sad. Next episode.
Yes, we'll lead with that in the next episode. So, join us next time. Next week, we'll be back with stories from the U.S. We'll touch a bit on East African states.
Rwanda.
Yes, exactly. The East African state. And of course, Bobby Wine is causing lots of trouble in Uganda.
Yes,
so we'll see.
He's always causing trouble.
So please join us again next week.